This is my program on Southern Cuisine. I'm Davyne Dial, and welcome to my kitchen. Tonight I'm doing a program on Crawfish Etouffee. I got lots of requests for that dish after people have seen the gumbo lesson, and so tonight I'm getting the ingredients together here to do it for you. But first, to make a really good etouffee, you need a very good seafood stock, and so I'm going to begin the program by showing you how to make a really good stock. As I buy shrimp or crab meat or crabs, whole crabs or crawfish, what I do is clean them and then I save the shells. With crawfish, if you're able to get whole crawfish, you save the heads and you put those all in a Ziploc baggie and freeze them, and try to accumulate 3 or 4 cups at least to 5 or 6 cups of shells and heads and whatever. I know it sounds gross cooking up crawfish or shrimp heads, but trust me, there's a lot of flavor in there, so you might as well use that flavor instead of throwing it in the trash. So what I have are some shrimp shells. I'm putting those in the pot. Always use cold water. I have some mussel shells from a meal I had at a restaurant the other night. I just thought I'd save those and put those in. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. I've got some oyster liquor. I'll put that in. And since I didn't have a lot of shells accumulated up from my freezer, I'm just going to add some 2 or 3 slices of, since this is a seafood, some fresh saltwater fish. And I've got some crawfish tails. Don't have any crawfish shells, don't have any crawfish heads, so what I'm going to do is just sacrifice and use some of the crawfish tails that I've got to make the crawfish etouffee. I'm going to put some of that into the stock making pot. Then an onion. Just kind of quartered up. You can leave the skin on. Some celery. And some garlic. And I'm going to cover all that with some cold water. And I'm going to put it on to simmer. I'm going to let this simmer slowly for a good 8 hours. I'm going to have about 1 gallon of liquid in here, and I want it to reduce to half. And then I'm going to use part of that, but also I can freeze the rest so that in the future, if I want to make like any kind of shrimp and grits or any kind of seafood dish that requires some seafood stock, I have it ready in the freezer. So I'm going to take my pot over to the stove, turn it up. I'm going to let it come to a slow boil. I'm going to heat it up slowly. As I said, whoops. So I'm going to let this come to a very slow boil, slowly, with some cold water. It's the cold water that extracts the flavor. So let that come to a low simmer, and then just let it evaporate over a period of 6 to 8 hours and reduce down. While we're waiting for that to reduce down, I'm going to show you also how to go ahead and make a beef stock too. I've had several requests for people wanting to know how do you make a basic stock. So this is a basic seafood. when I did the gumbo show, I did a basic turkey poultry stock, just using the carcass of the leftover carcass of the turkey. And tonight I'm going to also show you how to do a beef stock. Accumulated some leftover steak that I just froze because I knew I was going to be making up some beef, and some beef shanks. I'm putting these in a roasting pan, and what I'm going to try to do is get some color on them so that it really flavors up the stock, so that it's, as I said before, not just kind of like boring old white dead meat. So what you want to do is roast it up and get some good caramelization and color on the bones and on the beef. There's an awful lot of flavor in the bones, so you definitely want to use those. Anytime you have any beef bones, always save them, freeze them up, and pull them out and put them in a stock when you get ready to do a stock. I've got my oven preheated to about 400. It's nice and hot in there. And I'm going to just get those bones and that beef brown up nicely. Then we'll be back. Okay, it's been a couple hours and I think the bones are probably really nicely browned by now. They are. So I have a pot of cold water here. As I said before, you always start your stock with cold water, and you put it in the water. And cover that with a little more cold water, and I'm going to give it just a couple minutes for that pan to cool down. As you can see, I've got a little eruption going here, so I don't want to mess with it for a few minutes. But generally what you're going to do is put these in the pot, let it simmer a good 6 to 7 hours so that it's reduced till about half. Don't add any salt to it until you've come to the final product, because since it's going to be reduced, if you've got salt in there, it's probably going to intensify. And you're just safer if you just hold off on salting it towards the end. You're probably wondering why go to the trouble of making stock. First of all, it's a good use for leftover bones of any kind, beef, ham, veal. When you finish with the meal, or if you have these left over, you simply store these in the freezer up to 3 or 4 months till you get a nice little batch accumulated, 4 to 5 to 6 pounds. And then you don't waste it. And once you do your own stock, if you compare homemade stock to even the good stuff that you get for $2.50 a package or $3 a package, your stock is going to be far superior. So, you know, it's a good thing to do on a winter day whenever it's very chilly out and dark and cold. It's a creative thing to do, and your family and your loved ones will thank you for it, and you'll be able to enjoy a much better tasting meal. So try making your own stock. As I said, this is going to simmer for a good 7 or 8 hours, and then you either use it right away in whatever meal you're planning on using for the beef stock or the shrimp stock or poultry stock. But if you're not going to be able to use it right away, I suggest cooling it down very rapidly. And I do that by just freezing a couple of bags of, like sandwich-sized Ziploc bags with water in there, and put that in the stock and bring that down quite a bit so that you get the you just bring the temperature down as quickly as possible without diluting it. That's the purpose of keeping it in the Ziploc bag. So let it cool down just a little bit, and then put your Ziploc bag in there and bring it down further. And then you can pour it into Ziploc bags and freeze it, sandwich size bags or little snack size bags, whatever kind of amount you feel like you normally use. And that will keep for you for a good 4 to 6 months. And you'll find that it's much more satisfying than the commercial stuff. A lot of it has an awful lot of salt, a lot of MSG, and yours is going to taste just taste a lot better, and it's not that much trouble to do it. For the next show, I'll show you how to do a demi-glace sauce, and you do that with a basically reduced beef stock with another kind of sauce added to that. And that's the sauce that you get at higher end restaurants on a nice piece of steak or something. Periodically you'll see such and such a Kobe beef with demi-glace sauce. So demi-glace is a wonderful sauce that really enriches the flavor of whatever you're eating, and it's a little tedious to do, but it's definitely worth it. And then you can have your own. So while that beef stock is cooking, that's just an extra little lesson for, and just a bit of an aside from the etouffee instruction. So I'm sure that you know, if you know anything about Louisiana cooking, that you have the trinity that you work with. So I'm getting ready to do that again. It's chopped bell pepper, chopped onion, and chopped celery. So I've got some onion already chopped up in here, and I'm going to just chop up the celery very fine. My trusty little trash can going here. So I've got 2 heaps of vegetables. First one that I use to cool down the roux. Etouffee has a roux, so you know it gets very hot, so it cools it down. And then the second batch of vegetables you add towards the end to give some nice crunch and texture, additional crunch and texture to the dish. And also, if it hasn't been cooked very much, like these peppers, they have some wonderful color to them, and that adds some nice appearance to the dish. These red and yellow peppers. So I've got my roux that's been started. It's to the peanut butter colored phase, and it's going to need to be cooked just a little bit longer. So as soon as I get these vegetables chopped up, I'm going to finish off the roux to the point that it needs to be, and then add these veggies to it. Add the trinity to it. I will meet you back over at the stove shortly. So I've got the roux to a kind of a dark peanut butter phase. Probably needs to darken just a little bit more. Like I said earlier, this is a crawfish etouffee, but you can also do a shrimp. I got frozen crawfish tails at one of the local food stores. I did see that one of the natural food stores has wild crawfish tails, which is really good for a really good price, a little over $8 a pound. So if you want to get your crawfish locally, just search around one of the natural grocery stores in their frozen food department, and you'll see what I'm talking about. I used to live, as I said before, I used to live in New Orleans, and one time I was on a 2-lane back road in New Orleans. out in the boonies somewhere. Why I was there, I have no idea. But it was the season when they were, I don't know if they were mating or what they were doing. But the highway was covered with crawfish that had come out of the swamps on the side of the road. And they were rearing up at the cars coming along like they could do something about those cars that were fixing to squash those mud bugs into a massive gooey oil on the highway. But when they're prolific, they're very prolific. They did have a couple of bad seasons because Katrina brought in salt water into the areas where the crawfish thrive, and the water was too salty for them, so that they just were non-existent there since Katrina up until just recently. And now I hear that this year's going to be a bumper crop of crawfish. So let me keep stirring my roux here. Now I know some of you who've been to New Orleans have seen the T-shirt that said "pinch the tails and suck the heads." Well, I know that sounds gross and has a little bit of a double entendre sound to it, but that's really what you do with a fresh whole crawfish. Is you break it in half. There's some wonderful flavor where that break is that you suck at the back of the neck or the head. You suck that out, and then you pinch the tail, the end of the tail, and the crawfish meat just rolls right out of the end of that little kind of little miniature miniature lobster looking thing. So that's where that rather risque little saying comes from. It has its basis in some truth. So my roux here is pretty dark, and what I do to stop that heat process is I add the Trinity, and that's going to bring the cooking down. You're going to hear it really sizzling when I put this in. But that's going to bring that heat way, way down that's in the roux. Just keep moving it around while that iron pot, or while your pot is still really hot. And then I'm going to add 2 cups of my fish stock, or my seafood stock I have going here. Let me show you the end result. I've strained it, and the water had been up to about here on the pot, and now it's down to here, so you can see it reduced quite a bit. I have not salted it. Also with stock, whenever you're cooking it, don't stir it a lot. That's going to make that's kind of give you a kind of a cloudy stock. So don't stir it. I did cook my stock for a long time to reduce it. If you don't have the time to let it reduce for a good 6 or 8 hours, even if you have a half-hour stock, that's better than using plain water, and often it's going to be better than a can of stock that you get already prepared, and it's probably going to be better for you and your family. So stir that stock into the roux and Trinity mixture and let it just kind of meld together there. Etouffee is French for covering with a blanket, or a blanket. So what you're doing is making a blanket of crawfish or shrimp, and that's traditionally served over rice. Rice was a big staple in southern Louisiana. It grows there very easily, so almost everything has rice as a base. But you know, you could even do this with grits. So, you know, I happen to love seafood and grits mixture myself. So, I might need to add just a little more stock here because my mixture's getting a little thick. I added 2 cups, but I might have miscalculated how much roux I had going there. So I'm going to try another half cup and see what happens. Then it's just a matter of adding the spices, adding some garlic. Naturally, you always got to have garlic in most food that's good. So I've got a teaspoon of cayenne pepper. Actually, I have that. It's half cayenne pepper, and I've done half cayenne pepper and half smoked paprika. A half a teaspoon of salt and a teaspoon of thyme. Just going to sprinkle that in. I've got a couple of cloves of garlic that have been diced, and add that in. And I've got my crawfish tails. If you were using shrimp, the crawfish tails are almost cooked, so you're not going to have to, once you get to this point, you're not going to have to cook this etouffee very long at all, because you don't want to overcook the seafood. You just want to heat it up real well. But if you're doing shrimp, you can tell that shrimp is done whenever, shrimp tells you it's done by changing its color. And try not to overcook that either. You don't want to let your etouffee simmer for half an hour or 45 minutes after you've added your seafood to it, because that really ruins the seafood. I was surprised when I was kind of reading through the internet at different people's suggestions for making etouffee, and they're talking about cooking it for half an hour after you add the seafood. Well, let me tell you, that's going to ruin your etouffee. They don't know what they're doing if they're telling you to cook seafood half an hour or 45 minutes. Because you want the shrimp or the crawfish to be really tender, kind of done, but not well done at all. If you were equating it to how you cook a steak or meats that come, you know, do you like it, you know, when they ask you at the restaurant, do you want it medium or well or rare? I would say good seafood is best, to my taste, whenever it's medium rare to medium. So I've got my crawfish mixed in here. And then I'm going to finish off with 2 or 3 tablespoons of brandy. It's going to just give it a little kick. And I'm going to just let it simmer for a few minutes, and then it's going to be ready to taste. So, I might need to adjust my salt a little bit. I do want to add my final little touch of veggies so that they're going to be crunchy. And I'm just going to let it go for a few minutes. It's almost ready. I've been letting it simmer here for about 5 minutes. Just turn the heat up. You can also serve Cajun food like this, etouffee or gumbo, over a sweet potato. Because it grew down there too, and of course they would throw their etouffee or their gumbo on top of anything they had. And sweet potatoes are very prevalent down there. Yams. They call them yams, but actually that's a sweet potato. Now I'll be taking a sample of this over to the TV station, URTV, to see how they like it. So if you happen to go by there, ask them how they like the etouffee. And hopefully they'll give you an honest answer. I think they will. They told me, we think it should be a law or a rule that if you cook something and we show it, you have to bring us some food. So I said, well, hey, that sounds good to me. I enjoy having people eat my food and like it. Here's the etouffee. It's all ready. It's served over rice, and then gets a garnish of spring onions. Okay, let me taste it and see if it's good. Yeah. Okay, so the recipe is at my website, DavyneDial.com. Scroll down the left side and click on the cooking link. And thanks for watching.